presenter rights. Now you have presentation rights. So now you have to go to the top and share your screen or share your application.
Con gusto. Eso hago ahorita. La opción no me aparece activada. ¿Ahora sí?
Okay. Listo. We're done.
¿Empiezo?
Yeah. And
okay.
You can put the screen on full screen, your presentation, that would be great.
Ahí estamos.
Okay, you're on.
Buen día, compañeros. Soy Marta Cifuentes. Les saludo desde Guatemala. Soy oficial MEL del proyecto Construcción de Resiliencia y Capacidades para la Reducción de Riesgos a Desastres en Comunidades Vulnerables de América Latina y las Islas del Pacífico, que de forma...
Good morning. My name is Marta Cifuentes. I'm calling in from Guatemala. I'm the MEL officer for the CAMEL project, Building Resilience Capacity for DRR in Vulnerable Communities in Latin America and the Pacific Islands.
Como me han escuchado, el nombre del proyecto es un poco largo, entonces decidimos juntamente con los colegas de Melanesia, porque el proyecto se trabaja en Centroamérica, en El Salvador y Guatemala, y en Melanesia, en Vanuatu y Salomón. Entonces decidimos llamarle CAMEL al proyecto.
And as you can see, it is quite a long project name, and so to cut down on that, we decided together, the colleagues working here in Central America, in El Salvador and Guatemala, as well as our colleagues in Melanesia, in Vanuatu and Solomon Islands, to cut it down just to the CAMEL project, or CAMEL.
Mencionaba eso para que ustedes puedan estar familiarizados con CAMEL cuando vaya mencionándolo durante la presentación.
And that is just to let you know that when I refer to CAMEL in the presentation, I'm referring to the project itself.
Bien, compartiéndoles entonces...
Marta, antes de que siga, Marta, puede cambiar, esta presentación está en español, puede cambiar su presentación a inglés.
Ah, perfecto, un segundito.
El archivo PowerPoint que está compartiendo está en español.
Ajá. Un segundito, José. Deme un par de minutos. Solo voy a imprimir rapidito la presentación en español porque la necesito a la par. José, ¿me da 2 minutos?
Siga entonces.
Bueno, una disculpa por el espacio. Bien, compañeros, les compartía que con esta presentación pues voy a compartir con ustedes de alguna forma un resumen de la experiencia de la AIR que trabajamos el año pasado en Centroamérica.
So thank you for your patience, and I apologize for the delay. I want to share this presentation, which is a summary of the AIR experience from the event that we held last year.
Quisiera partir compartiéndoles unos datos como referencia del AIR.
I'd like to
Lo
start by
trabajamos.
giving some reference information about the AIR event. Marta, no sé si pone mute y hacemos simultáneo. El otro.
You can move to simultaneous translation, Jesse. It's no problem. I have muted Marta.
Perfect, thank you. Adelante, Marta. So this is Marta's voice. Once again, I would just go over that we held our AIR event on September 24th and 25th, 2015 in San Salvador. Adelante, Marta, fluido, le escuchamos perfectamente. So at that time, we held a binational workshop. And in that workshop, we had a total of 30 participants. From the different partner organizations. And of the 4 organizations, there were 2 that were working in El Salvador and 2 working in Guatemala. Participants included members from our technical teams, team coordinators, and also community leaders from the intervention areas. Our event was co-facilitated by Jose Chacon and Jorge Figueroa, who is our project coordinator for Central America, as well as myself, Marta Cifuentes. The objectives that we had for the event: in general terms, we wanted to create a space for critical reflection, in which all of the relevant actors could share their perspectives on the processes and the scope of the outcomes from the implementation of the first year of the CAMEL project. Specifically, we wanted to have the opportunity to reflect on the tools and resources that were available to each of us to be able to meet these proposed outcomes for year 1. Additionally, we wanted to be able to interpret some of the information that was generated by the project. This included some of the baseline data and the reports from what we learned in year number 1. From that, we wanted to identify what were the changes in people's lives in the communities. Third, we wanted to define goals for years 2. And these would be goals that could be incorporated based on the lessons that we were learning from the AIR process from year 1. recognized that the latter specific objectives, the final two, were fairly ambitious of what we expected to get out of a 2-day workshop. Nonetheless, we knew we had a solid team that had worked very hard in the field. So we decided to put it into practice using a participatory methodology. In this case, the methodology that we used for the workshop was what we called building a resilience tree. This included a lot of participatory analysis, working groups, and discussion and reflection together. As well as brainstorming and lectures from the 3 facilitators that I mentioned at the start. And this helped us to exchange some of the experiences of the implementation of the project in year 1 in the field. In this space, each partner, they spoke from their, or based on the experience in their respective areas of intervention. There were 5 areas of intervention we were working on in this region in the project at that time. Each partner then was able to contribute their own analysis and the lessons learned that they had identified from their experience in the field. Marta, no la oigo. Sorry, the audio has cut out for Marta for a moment. Marta, no la oigo. Apologize and thank you for waiting. So I was giving you a general overview of our methodology, which was building a resilience tree. And this is what we used for our air exercise. Now I'd like to give you a sense of how we went through this methodology step by step over the course of our air exercise. We started by building what we could call the tree trunk. We did this by asking each one of the 5 groups, coming respectively from the 5 different intervention areas, 2 in El Salvador and 3 in Guatemala. We asked them each in their own words and according to their own understanding and the understanding they had built over year 1 of the project, to write down their concept of resilience, recognizing that this concept of resilience is one of the core approaches of the project. And so I have on the screen here the concepts that 3 partners came up with, 2 from El Salvador and 1 from Guatemala. once each team had put together their concept of resilience, they were able to put that as the trunk of the tree that we were building. From there, we moved to build the branches for our trees. As you can see here, our tree had 4 main branches, and each branch had a name. And this name was related to, or one was related to each of the 4 main CAMEL objectives in Central America. You can see this branch here, which has to do with livelihoods. It was our livelihoods branch, because our first objective was to strengthen the viability of livelihoods and promote women's empowerment in these livelihoods. I would emphasize for a moment this topic of women's empowerment because gender lens is another one of the main and important approaches for our project. The second branch, which is linked to our second main objective, was focused on community organizing and coordination and engagement with local authorities, promoting adaptation and respecting the different needs of men and women. Then in our third objective, on our third branch, we have promoting a healthy environment for appropriate management of our natural resources. And this includes issues on hygiene, water, and sanitation. These were initiatives done on a community level with adults as well as in schools in the communities. And then branch 4, objective 4, has to do with building knowledge for disaster risk reduction and resilience. And this includes within the participating communities as well as within the members of our technical teams. Once we identified the main branches of our resilience tree, we encouraged each of our teams to work and put together some of the foliage of the tree to make sure that this was a tree with leaves and life, and the leaves would be different colored Post-it notes. Once again, we made our leaves and our foliage with different colored Post-it notes, and the different colors corresponded to these different evaluation criteria. And you can see here the breakdown by color. Each color had a question which invited each of our teams and all of the participants to undertake an analysis of how they had done their work in the terrain, in the field, in year 1. And you can see each question has a different color assigned to it. Giving the teams a chance to think about each one of these questions separately. So here you can see some images of what the resilience trees ended up looking like. This is the tree that was produced by the people from Santa Catarina y Iztahuacan. This is a municipality in the department of Solola in Guatemala. At the bottom, you see the team had their concept of resilience, what they had built and understood over the course of the year as part of their tree trunk. And then you can see the leaves on each of these branches. And the leaves have the answers to those questions that were color-coded. This is the tree from the Ellas Mujeres team, which worked in the area of Concepcion Batres in El Salvador. This is a women's organization that worked with us just in year 1 of the project. I also can show you here the tree from the Fundesa team. They work in San Luis La Herradura. This is the team from ACCSS that work in Champerico and Retaluleo in Guatemala. And then this is the tree from Asociación Madre Tierra, which is a grassroots women's organization that works in Suchitepeques in Guatemala. Once we had our 5 trees built, we invited each one of the teams to take a gallery walk and get a closer look to see both the work that the other groups had done in the trees as well as their answers to the questions. So here you can see people had a chance to review the others' trees and work, and also to have their own assessment and evaluation of the work that each had done. They took a look at these trees with the objective of pulling out some interesting ideas or ideas they had questions about, comparing it as well to what they had written, and then they were able to note down their ideas and suggestions, not as other leaves or comments, rather they identified them with these symbols, with different colored stars. As you can see here on this slide, each different color star has a different meaning. So a red star would mean I disagree. If the team that was walking around to see the tree from another organization, if they saw a comment or they saw a leaf and they disagreed with it, it didn't strike them as right, they would put a red star there. A green star if this simply did not move us forward. And then lastly, the white or the silver stars would be put down if we thought this was an important idea for analysis. The idea was to be able to give some feedback in each comment to build some constructive criticism to strengthen each of the trees we had made. After doing the analysis and building our trees, at each of the tables there was a person who was designated to input some of these data into an Excel file. Taking note of the analysis from each group to be able to then share it and have it be part of our event documentation. After the resilience tree exercise, we had another point in our AIR agenda, which was to examine and analyze the baseline results, or the results that we had from the baseline study in our project. So I can speak to you a little bit about that. The data that we collected and the sample and analysis, you can see it on this slide. We carried out the baseline survey in communities in Guatemala and El Salvador, which is our area of intervention for the project here in Central America. We collected the data from March to May 2015. We had a planned sample of 474 interviews, but we ended up collecting 489. The methodology, it was interviews and surveys with families participating in the project, local leaders, and with focus groups. This methodology was implemented in 39 different communities in the project area of implementation. The organizations that participated in collecting these baseline data were AS Mujeres and Fundesa in El Salvador, and in Guatemala it was the Mother Earth Women's Association, AMT, as well as the Community Association for Community Health Services, which is ACCSS. We identify a reliability of 95% with a 5% margin of error. And the data collection, as you can see, we collected this using Kobo tools, or the Kobo toolbox. This was actually a tool that the teams themselves had to take some time to learn to use. And the idea there was to make sure that we could build some installed capacity for the use of these technological tools in each of our local teams. After sharing these data, we were able to together perform an analysis of some of the relevant indicators from the content of our baseline study. And it followed along the lines of these 5 indicators: dietary diversity, crop diversity, use of agrochemical products, livelihoods, and the index of community engagement with their institutions. We thought this was especially important because in many of the communities where we're working, there's very little presence of public institutions. And the community leaders are making efforts to reach out and engage with public governmental as well as non-governmental institutions in the area. Then we took some time to have an analysis of the process itself for collecting the baseline data, especially looking at the dates for data collection and the quantity and the number of communities or the communities themselves where we collected the data on these dates. And then the third area that we discussed was to be able to have a joint analysis of the tools and resources that have been available to meet our objectives. We spent some time working to identify the success factors in each area of intervention. Once again, as I had mentioned at the start, we had 5 working groups corresponding to the 5 local areas of intervention where our project worked in year 1. We worked to identify some of the reflections as well as our assumptions, particularly thinking about how the intervention worked and what worked in year 1. Then with each of our working groups, with each of the teams, we conducted an analysis on how we were doing in reaching the targets from our yearly plan using our MEL tools, with some particular emphasis on the consolidation of our quantitative activities as well as trying to monitor our progress towards the indicators. For the latter, we used a stoplight tool to determine the level of progress that our local teams had achieved in the field. Now, I'd like to speak a little bit about how we applied the results from the AIR exercise from year 1 in building our plans for year 2. So I've spoke a little bit about the activities during our AIR event and some of the reflection. As a result of that, we ended up with this challenge, which was how do we apply the lessons learned from our AIR reflection in our work for year 2 of the project. To that end, I can share that the reflections that emerged from the resilience tree exercise led us in year 2 to include these dimensions of resilience in our yearly plan for year 2, trying to identify the extent to which our project actions are contributing to adaptive capacity, absorptive capacity, or transformation. This is something that we're especially trying to take a look at in Guatemala, in Champerico and Santa Catarina Iztahuacan, where our partner ACCSS is working. Additionally, in year 2, and as a result of our conclusions from our AIR event, we've decided to have a greater emphasis in implementing community practices for building resilience to climate change. Examples of this are working on irrigation systems for basic grain production, making sure that families can guarantee a harvest for corn and beans, especially because we are facing a severe drought problem in Central America, and so many families had not been able to get a harvest. We also are incorporating practices for diversifying garden plots, training leaders and technicians in WASH, or water and sanitation, working to implement economic initiatives with women at their core, this is another one of the actions that has been promoted by women's organizations in the communities. Even as part of that, we've been able to identify some challenges for moving forward. One of those challenges is continued awareness-raising processes on gender issues in the communities. I can share the experience we heard from a particular community, a problem in which once the women started making money from these economic initiatives, the men took the money from the women, the money that the women themselves had made from the sale of their own products, especially the sale of the corn harvest that the women had, or the corn products that the women had through their seed bank initiative. Women in the communities have been doing different economic initiatives. We have seed banks in Cifuentes. There's a group of women that has organized to set up a restaurant, and they're selling food in the communities. There's other women's groups that have organized to raise and sell pigs and chickens, among other initiatives. In addition to the groups that had been established in year 1, for year 2, we are promoting the establishment of new community savings groups, or Saving for Change, and to engage with the groups that had already been established and strengthened over year 1. As a part of that, something that we're really trying to incorporate in year 2 is strengthening our internal alliances with the gender teams and the Saving for Change teams internally within Oxfam. Our colleagues that are working on these topics have helped to strengthen some of the knowledge and capacity with the teams in our project, and they are important links and liaisons for capacity building and knowledge building with our local technical teams. On this slide, I just wanted to show you how we were able to document the responses and the analyses from each group. So this is an example from one group from our AIR exercise. Looking at the eventual documentation from the comments and the answers, and then the classifications of each of those in our resilience tree. In terms of our baseline study, after our analysis in the AIR exercise, as we plan to carry out a study in year 2, we recognize that we need to take a look at the baseline survey content as a tool for our midline study, because in our project we have planned not just to do a baseline and an end line study. Rather, we'd like to take this opportunity, now that we are a year and a half through implementation, to do a midline study to see how the processes are going in the communities. In that sense, together with the technical teams, we reviewed the content of our baseline surveys to make sure that it was easily understandable for our technical staff and that they could apply these surveys correctly as they were gathering data in the midline study in the communities. We've also worked to have a consolidated view of the beneficiaries by partner to be able to ensure we had the right population sample for data collection for our midline study. In the area of San Luis La Herradura, where Fundesa is working, we are actually going to go back to do an initial baseline study because these are new project communities that are joining into the project in year 2. These new communities are coming into the project because we have expanded Fundesa's area of intervention and concluded our work with AS Mujeres, who only worked in their communities for year 1 of the project. Another important element to mention for the midline study for our project is that we have given continued training and support for partners in our technical teams to be able to continue to strengthen some of these capacities that we had started to build on the use of COBO tools. We also worked to support partners for the purchase of some electronic equipment to be able to perform and facilitate the work, at least for data collection for the midline study. It's important to share that the partners as well have all committed to work on adjusting the surveys and their technical training for this kind of work. This is something that we had worked on together for the baseline study, but what we didn't have was a survey to be able to talk to the technical staff and the partners themselves in terms of their need for training. And so this is something that we're working to produce for year 2 of the project. So the surveys that we have produced for the midline study, it's also an opportunity to hear from the communities, from community leaders, men and women, and this time we're also including this added element of hearing the opinions and the needs of our technical teams as well. And of course, to go into the field, we need to know the budget and the needs from our technical teams to be able to gather these data. As well as a starting point for the midline analysis, we have reviewed the content of the family survey, the survey that we had used for the baseline study, and we wanted to make adjustments to make sure that both the technical staff as well as the participating families could fully understand the content and the information we were looking for. We also have strengthened our alliance and engagement with the gender team from Oxfam America in Guatemala, who has helped to give us some ideas and clear orientation to include elements for awareness raising and make sure that we're using gender-sensitive indicators, especially following the guidelines of the gender perspective, the gender lens that Oxfam seeks to use. As well, we have worked with the Global Gender Advisor from headquarters and we are continuing to coordinate with her to be able to improve some of the knowledge and capacity of our technical teams on this issue. We also worked to analyze the process itself of collecting the baseline data. We sat down with the partner technical teams to analyze how the process went the first time and make sure that we are respecting the same dates and some of the same methods for data collection this next time around for our midline study, to make sure that there's comparability between the data, and when it comes time to analyze and compare the progress that we have made, we make sure that the data is comparable, especially by ensuring that we've collected the information at the same time and under some of the same conditions. As well, we had some joint reflection with our partners in terms of the sample size and the number of families participating in the project, as well as the number of communities. And precisely these days, actually for some days already, our partners have been back in the communities collecting the data for the midline study. I'd also like to share that we were able to have an analysis of the tools and resources that were available to be able to meet the objectives. In that sense, over year 2 of the project, we have tried to implement greater economic initiatives with strong participation from women in the communities. As I had alluded to, these economic initiatives are different in each community and with each partner, and it depends on the conditions and what is appropriate for each group and in each community. To be able to implement these economic initiatives, groups have been trained with a methodology on women's economic empowerment. Making sure that we are collecting data and also have the information of the economic transactions and the growth of the initiatives from each of the groups. In this second year as well, we are continuing interinstitutional coordination. Each of the partners is engaging particularly with local and departmental government institutions. As a result of these alliances, for example, the Asociación Madre Tierra has received or gained some support from government ministries for workshops on strengthening livelihoods. In the case of some of the communities in the area of Champerico, they worked with the partner ACCSS implementing irrigation systems to respond to the drought. And this has generated some interest on the part of the Ministry of Agriculture and the Land Fund in Guatemala. This has been some very positive interest. But the communities also identify that the alliance with these government institutions can be a double-edged sword, as the government technicians want to come in and take ownership of these initiatives and take responsibility and credit for the work that's been done. As a result of the alliance and the coordination that they've had, our partners have had to sit down with some of the leadership of the institutions and make sure it's clear that it's been the CAMEL project that has been working on these solutions in the communities rather than the government institution that's trying to take credit for it. As well, in this year 2 of the project, we have been working to promote some of the successful agricultural practices developed in year 1. This includes greater promotion of agricultural practices using local forest microorganisms, both collecting and identifying these microorganisms, and using them to promote organic fertilizer and spray fertilizer for their crops that they're able to use in their family gardens as well as in their agricultural plots. This has been something that's been very successful in the communities, and the families have recognized that it provides significant savings for them. They no longer have to purchase chemical fertilizers, and they recognize that there are local resources that they can use to help reproduce and use these microorganisms. As well, in terms of strengthening community engagement, this is something that our partners continue to promote in this engagement with government institutions. Lastly, we had the opportunity to analyze how we were doing in our yearly plan targets. In our year 2 plan, we took the opportunity to review and define the MEL tools that we would use and do so in consensus with our partners. The MEL tools contribute to objective number 5 of our project, making sure that our systems are functional, and this requires commitment from our partners. And now we are receiving information from these partners on a monthly basis in terms of the quantitative data from the activities that they're doing in the field, and also some more qualitative review using a stoplight tool. So that's what I had to share. Thank you very much. This is a photograph from all of our technical team and Oxfam colleagues that participated in the AIR event from year 1.
Bien, muchas gracias por su atención, compañeros. Muchas gracias por permitirnos este espacio para compartir la experiencia de la IR del año 1 de CAMEL. Pues estamos a la orden, y compartirles también que para este segundo año estamos planificando trabajar la IR del año 2 en el mes de julio, y pues posteriormente se las compartiremos también. Feliz día.
So thank you very much, colleagues, for your attention and for giving me this opportunity to share our experience here in Central America with the Year 1 AIR exercise for CAMEL. We would be happy to continue the discussion in any way you like, and we are working towards our AIR exercise for Year 2 of the project, which we are planning on holding in July. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a nice day.